Hello, real estate friends. Hope your day is going great. Melissa English here. So, listen, we're going to talk about this NAR settlement lawsuit stuff. And I know for me anyway, it was a little confusing. I was a little overwhelmed. Saw this stuff on social media. I started freaking out a little bit. And so I'm like, okay, I really have to kind of figure this out, understand it in very simple English terms so that I can best understand it to explain it to my buyers and my seller clients and all of that. So in this video, we're going to break it down very short, sweet, to the point, very simple, what the lawsuit's about, what the changes are. And I'm actually going to share with you how I plan to implement the changes in my business. And so, maybe you can pick up a few little pointers and use it in your business as well. So essentially, the we know, okay, first and foremost, change is not fun, right? Nobody likes change. I have a certain way in my business that I've been doing for years on how I handle my listing presentations. I have a certain way that I deal with my buyer clients, and so some of that stuff's going to change now. But the biggest change that's really going to happen is how we communicate and how we talk about our money with our clients. And that's really essentially the biggest change. Um, Really simply put, as far as the lawsuit goes, there was a lawsuit placed on many of the bigger brokerages for price fixing, saying that the real estate brokers' commissions were inflating the prices, and it was kind of that standard 6%, and that most sellers felt obligated to pay that certain percentage of real estate commission. So that's where the lawsuit. That's kind of uh, a summary of what the lawsuit's even about. But here's the deal. As long as I've been in real estate and, even through the real estate school, and I'm sure it hasn't changed in what they teach today, but all real estate pieces, including real estate commission, is negotiable. Never ever has a seller ever been obligated to pay a buyer's agent commission. Never were they obligated to pay a 3% commission. Never a listing agent or a listing broker. There was never any standard in place as far as 3%. Now, some of the broker trainings for real estate agents, and because I know I've received training like this many years ago, where it was just kind of told to us that on these listing presentations that we say, hey, look, 6% is our standard. Okay. But again, that was all negotiable. But in any case, lack of communication was the biggest problem when it came to commission. And so that's where a lot of the changes are coming into play, and that now we need to openly communicate about our money. All right. And I don't know why, talking about real estate commission, I don't know why it's such a big elephant and like it's scary to talk about, because at the end of the day, oh my gosh, I don't know about you, but we deserve every dollar, right? So we as real estate agents, we hold so much value. Yeah, we open doors, we show property. That's like 10% of what we do. The job doesn't really start until we get to that contract phase as far as a buyer's agent's concerned, right? Because now we've got inspections and appraisals and knowing what's appropriate for us to suggest that our clients ask for, and all of the things that go with that. From the listing agent side, same deal. So most of the listing agent work is done on the front end, right? All the way up to the listing date, really. And so from that point, um, it is making sure that the contract and the paperwork and all of that is done correctly for our sellers. But at the end of the day, we earn our money, right? And so we deserve that compensation. If you think about attorneys, right, and think about real estate agents as like little mini attorneys, AI is not gonna replace that human connection as to scenarios, right? Because there's a many a different scenarios in any part of the real estate process, and those clients being able to pick up the phone and have the answer that they want by talking to their professional real estate agent, there's value to that, right? They get the immediate response, the immediate answer that they're looking for. um and I'm looking down because I've got a couple notes here, but essentially, think about an attorney, right? And you think about if you've ever been in a car accident, right? Like a little fender bender or whatever, right? You might call an attorney. That attorney then goes and knows the appropriate paperwork to file with your insurance company. They start that process. And I don't know about you, but you know, 9 times out of 10, the attorney's getting the first chunk of that check before you do. And sometimes there's barely enough left over to even cover the damages of the vehicle, your own personal pain and suffering, and all of that. The attorney's going to get their money, and so they are owed that, right? So as a client of an attorney, and say I got into a fender bender, and if I want to pick up the phone and I have just a general question to ask my attorney, I get that answer immediately. That is the value that that attorney is providing. Same difference with a real estate professional and what we do. Um, and actually, it's funny because the whole lawsuit that all of this started, and I don't know, what was it, like 400 million or something they settled out on. The sellers, they got like 50 bucks, 100 bucks. It was like nothing. All the attorneys made all the money on that for representing them, if that makes sense. So anyway, we are owed money. We are going to be compensated. None of that's going to change. What will change is who's paying us and how that money is exchanged. So, let's see. So let me tell you how I normally go on a listing appointment. Okay, this is normal every day. This is what I do when I go on a listing appointment. Let's pretend that I'm going on a listing appointment for this really pretty little cute little blue house right here, right? And let's say the seller is Bob, and I go to Bob and I'm like, "Hey Bob, super cute house. I feel very confident we can get this one sold for you for $300,000." Now, Bob, with that, you're going to have some fees in there. Okay. And so, what I traditionally do is I have a net to seller sheet, right? And on the net to seller sheet, I have the estimated sales price of $300,000. And just below that, I'll have tell Bob, after I've given him my spiel as to what we are going to do as a real estate broker and real estate listing professional to get his home sold, and navigating all of the marketing and the negotiations through the contracts and finding him a ready, willing, and able buyer, that we are going to charge 6% of commission. That is our standard. Okay. Um, Now, of that 6% on that net to seller sheet, I've got on there that 3% of that 6 will be given to a buyer's broker should a buyer's broker bring our buyer. All right. And so within that same net to seller sheet, again, I've got the 300,000, I've got 6%, which is 18,000 that's in commissions, right? 3% to the listing side, 3% to the buyer side. I'll also let Bob know that I need to set the expectation to Bob, to let Bob know, hey, look, Bob, we might have a great buyer that's in place that loves your home and is willing to pay the $300,000. However, it would be a competitive disadvantage if I did not let you know that there is a possibility that that buyer may need some help in closing cost. So I don't know what our offer is going to look like, but I want to kind of just set that expectation, lay these numbers out for you. It's very possible they may ask 1 to 3% in closing cost. Okay, so I might go ahead and pop that $9,000 figure on the net to seller sheet. So now the net to seller sheet looks like Bob would net around $273,000. That's a traditional listing appointment. That's normally what I do. Okay. Now, if we get an offer that comes in and the buyer's not asking for any closing cost or anything of that sort, then obviously Bob's going to net an additional $9,000 from that net to seller sheet that I gave him. But that's what a normal listing appointment sort of looks like when we get into the numbers portion of the appointment. All right. So normally Bob agrees to that. Bob says, yep, that sounds good. I'm good with that. I'm good with the 6%. I'm good with the 3 on the buyer side if they need it. And so everybody agrees, everybody's happy. So then I take the listing, I put it in the MLS. I list the house at $300,000. And at the bottom, I add in there that, buyer's agent's commission is going to be 3%. That's the part that changes. Okay. So, when we go to closing, right? We get a HUD statement, a settlement statement, right? And typically on that settlement statement, there's a little spot in there that talks about commission. And typically it is listed out that ABC company, ABC brokerage receives $18,000 in commission. And then under that, ABC brokerage pays XYZ brokerage 9,000 in commission, right? So that's normally how it's broken out. Well, as far as the MLS goes, and us putting the little co-op there and that being laid out on the HUD statement, that is no longer the deal. Okay, that is not how it's going to happen anymore. No longer can a listing broker pay a buyer's broker, period. And the MLS said, we do not want any talk, any verbiage, anything about commissions to be listed on our MLS, period. They don't want to be involved with commission. They don't want anything to do with it. Okay. And when it comes to settlement statements, no longer will ABC broker pay XYZ broker. It's just not going to happen. There are now, and I guess there always has been, but there's 3 ways that a buyer's broker can be paid. All right. Number 1, they can be paid by the seller. Yes, they can. But what that's going to look like on the HUD statement, instead of ABC broker paying XYZ broker, it's going to say Bob seller pays XYZ broker. That's it. All right. So Bob can pay the buyer's broker. The buyer can pay the buyer's broker. So whoever they're getting represented, whoever's representing them, whatever the case is there, the buyer can pay. Or number 3, you can have both of them pay and agree to that service. So the seller could say, well, I'll do 1.5. The buyer could say, well, I'll do 1.5, or whatever, the fee is there. And again, those fees are negotiable, just like they're negotiable on the seller side. All right. So that essentially is the biggest change, is that there's no more talk about co-ops, commissions, brokers paying other broker, none of that. We're not doing any of that anymore. Okay. So that's not going to be on the MLS. Now, you can go to your own website, your broker, any other website, anything like that. You can talk about what the seller might be willing to pay that buyer's broker. Okay. But nevertheless, they don't want it on the MLS. So this is what my new listing appointments are going to look like when I go talk to Bob. And then I'm going to tell you how I'm going to present myself to buyers. Okay. So when I go to Bob's house, his cute little blue house right here, and it's $300,000, and I say, Bob, look, all right, so we're going to come in, we're going to represent you. We can get $300,000 for your house. House prices are not going to change. I don't know why people think it is. The only thing that, why would a house price change? It has nothing to do with commission. It's going to either lessen or strengthen Bob's net, right? But the house is still valued at $300,000. That is not going to change regardless of how the cookie's sliced on the back end. So Bob's house, and I tell him, this is my new way of business. I come in with my net to seller sheet, same sheet. Bob, I think we can get $300,000 for your house. Of that, I am willing to promote it and market it, list it for you, represent you, run all the transaction, help you throughout the contract process, all the things for a listing broker fee of 3%. Okay, which is what do we say, $9,000, right? So, and I got my little calculator here. So if I take that 300,000 minus the 9, now we're at 291. Now, Bob, and this is how I'm going to position it. The same way I do when I'm talking to Bob about paying buyer's closing cost, right? Bob, here's the thing. Okay. You could have a perfect buyer that loves this home, that wants to buy this home, and it would be a disadvantage, honestly, it would be, what is the word? Competitive disadvantage if I did not tell you that a buyer coming in very well may ask you to pay for 3% to their buyer's agent. And they also very well may ask you to help them with 3% of their closing cost. That's a total of 6%. So numbers are still the same, all right? Because if you take that, that's 18,000, right? It's just sliced a little bit differently, right? So I'm letting Bob know, look, it's very possible. I don't know because I don't have the offer, but it's very possible that that buyer needs help paying their broker, their buyer's broker for representation. And they also very well may need help in some closing cost. So with that 6%, that's $18,000 plus the $9,000 for the listing broker, we're at 27,000. Okay. And then if I minus 300,000 for the sales price, Bob's net is still sitting at $273,000. Do you feel comfortable with that? How do you feel? His response to the paying the buyer's broker is going to be no different as him saying, well, I don't want to pay their closing costs. Either he's going to agree to do it or he's not. But it's our job as listing agents to let our clients know, look, a it could be a competitive disadvantage if you do not kind of consider that these may be parts of that offer. Okay. Now, you could, if you would like, you could go ahead and agree to paying the buyer's broker, and at least they know that you're willing to take care of that part if you would like to. And the seller could automatically say, you know what? I'm going to agree to pay 3% of their closing costs, and I'm going to agree to pay their buyer's broker. I'm going to agree. I'm good at the 274. I'm good at that net. So if you can get, if we can get a buyer, 273, if you can get a buyer in here, if they are represented or whatnot, I'll go ahead and do that. So now me as a listing agent, I now can promote that we have, $18,000 in concessions, right? So that could be to pay the buyer's broker, a little bit in closing costs, however they want to slice and dice that up, right? At the end of the day, Bob's net still looks the same, right? So that's how I plan to position it on my listing appointments. And it's basically just setting that expectation, going ahead and laying it out on the front end as to what those numbers are going to look like. Now, when it comes to my buyers, and this is where I think that this lawsuit actually could be an advantage to us as buyer's agents. I don't know about you, but for many years when I first started in the business, I never got a buyer's agreement signed. Never. I would just go and show them houses and then hope and cross my fingers that they would use me when they found their house. I haven't had the experience of ever losing a buyer, but I know many agents that have. They spend a year working with somebody, and then all of a sudden, a month later or a year later, they realize they went and bought a house with another agent. I know that's happened to a few of my agent friends, or quite a bit of them. So, the second piece to this whole lawsuit and the new rules that are in place is that we must have a buyer's agreement signed, period. And that's actually better because now and everybody knows everything's laid out on the front end. The biggest difference here is going to be just like having a listing appointment. You're going to have a buyer's appointment, whether that be at lunch or at your office or wherever, maybe even just going and touring a house and having the appointment right there. But it's essentially saying, look, I'm going to come in. This is the value I'm going to bring. You have to value proposition yourself. And how I love to value proposition myself as a real estate agent is to show them all the what's that I'm going to do, not how I'm going to do it, right? But these are a list of everything I'm going to do for you that you don't have to worry about, and that's the value I bring. It's not necessarily how many transactions you've closed and all that kind of stuff, right? That just helps with the experience and building your resume. But it's the what, not the how, right? So don't worry about the how. I've got you covered on that part. Now, with that, I do have a fee of 3% of whatever price we're going after. And, if you're prepared for that, it's like this. We may be able to get the seller to pay me and pay my fee, but there's a chance we may not, right? And so it's kind of like when that buyer goes and talks to their lender, and the lender says, "Look, you're going to need, $30,000 to buy a house because you're going to need, 3% in closing cost." Um, it's no different when that buyer calls you and says, "Well, I got to have $30,000 to buy the house." And we tell that buyer client, "Look, it's a possibility we can get the seller to help with some of that." No difference, right? So when it comes to our fee, we have an agreement with them that says somebody's going to pay us, either the seller or them, right? And they agree to that. And then we go to work and we show them houses and we start representing them and all of that. Um, with them understanding that there's a possibility we can get the seller to pay for it, but if not, they will be responsible for that. So, with that being the case, um, here's the thing. Again, I know change is hard. I know it's difficult and all of that. Our communication and how we talk about our money and how we're paid, that just, be proud of that, right? So yeah, I mean, this is what I'm gonna, and I'll tell you now, I've had clients that would call, not clients, people that would call me, and they found me online or whatever, and they're like, "Hey, I just wanted to see like what you would charge to come list my house." Well, during that time, I would tell them, "Look, this is the list of everything you're going to get." I would build that value over the phone with them in a 5-10 minute phone conversation. And I would say, and my fee for that as a listing broker would be 6% of the sales price. And then their response was, "Well, I can get somebody to do it for 4% or 3%. Go do that." Because I'm not, right? So it's a lot of work we do. It's so much work we do. And if they want to go with a discount broker, they're going to get discount broker service. Odds are, listing with a good listing agent or with an agent that, can really help them, they're going to save the difference anyway. And so, that's my take on it. Don't undervalue your service and don't undervalue what you have to offer your clients, because, look, you got to know your worth. You got to know what you're good at. You got to know, and before you think, "Oh, well, I'm not good at anything," you're really good at something, right? And so that has to do with the real estate transaction. And so you need to really build that resume. Really, like, it's kind of like having a listing presentation. You want to now have a buyer's presentation, and you want to kind of show them all that value that you have to provide, and why you're the best to work with, and why you're more fun, and how you can make it just a really awesome, unique, wonderful buying experience. So hopefully this cleared up some answers. Hopefully you can use some of the tactics that I shared with you today in your listing appointments and working with buyers. I want to know what questions you have, what your thoughts, what your opinions are. So definitely let me know in the comments. And if you haven't yet, definitely hit the subscribe button. I'd love to become real estate friends. And until the next time, I will see you soon. Have a great rest of your day. Let's get out there. Let's get it. See you soon.